Over 1,200 precision airstrikes have completely decimated targets across the Middle East in the last 72 hours, and you are only just finding out about it right now. We are officially in the middle of a massive, unannounced war, but here's the problem. Striking a target is easy, but surviving the fallout is practically impossible. That's where this becomes dangerous, because the retaliation will not be televised. It will be felt in your wallet, your gas tank, and global stability. And this changes everything. 2 hours ago, President Donald J. Trump walked to the podium in the White House briefing room and delivered a chilling update on something the American public had not heard a single whisper about: Operation Epic Fury. This is not a contingency plan. It is an ongoing, massive military operation that has been violently underway for 3 full days without a single word of public disclosure. B-2 stealth bombers have already penetrated Iranian airspace. Carrier-based aircraft have flown hundreds of sorties. Submarine-launched cruise missiles have struck deep into Iranian territory. Trump opened his address to Project Overwhelming Strength, announcing that American forces are systematically dismantling Iran's ability to threaten global stability. But the revelation that operations of this magnitude have been ongoing for 3 days without public knowledge is historically unprecedented. This 72-hour radio silence suggests the administration deliberately wanted to establish irreversible facts on the ground before facing the inevitable public and international backlash. Americans are now waking up to a war already in its second phase. In the first 72 hours, American forces conducted over 1,200 strike missions against Iranian nuclear facilities, ballistic missile sites, naval assets, and command infrastructure. That represents 400 strikes every single day, roughly 17 precision strikes per hour around the clock. That operational tempo requires a massive deployment of aerial assets, continuous satellite intelligence gathering, and flawless coordination. This is a sustained air campaign on a scale approaching the devastating opening phases of Desert Storm. Furthermore, the president claimed that not a single American aircraft has been lost, and not a single American casualty has been reported. This heavy emphasis on zero losses frames the operation to the public as a cost-free victory, at least so far. He declared that Iran's nuclear weapons program has been forcefully set back by a decade, their ballistic missile production reduced by 80%, and their naval forces completely neutralized. These are paradigm-shifting claims. Setting back a decentralized nuclear program requires destroying human expertise, which cannot simply be bombed from the sky. Achieving an 80% reduction in missile production means striking a highly secretive network of underground factories. Achieving all of this simultaneously would represent one of the most effective air campaigns in military history. But this is exactly where operational claims violently collide with strategic reality. Let us assume every tactical objective was achieved flawlessly. What has actually been accomplished strategically? The Iranian government remains firmly in place. Its military command structure survives. Its vast proxy networks across the entire Middle East are untouched. Its psychological will to resist has only been hardened, and its ability to retaliate through asymmetric means has not been addressed in the slightest. Trump addressed the looming threat of retaliation with an ultimatum. He made it clear to Iran's leaders that any attack on American interests will be met with a response 10 times greater than what they have already experienced. That specific threat reveals an impossible operational challenge. If 1,200 strikes in 3 days have not produced an immediate Iranian surrender, what exactly would 12,000 strikes accomplish? It reveals a glaring vulnerability. Despite overwhelming attacks, Washington still fears the Iranian response enough to issue apocalyptic threats. What Trump deliberately chose not to address speaks just as loudly as the bombs currently falling. There was absolutely no mention of international support, no coalition partners, no United Nations authorization. The operation appears to be a completely unilateral American action. There was no mention of Iranian casualties, military or civilian. Most importantly, there was absolutely no discussion of what comes after the strikes. If Iran's capabilities are degraded, what prevents them from aggressively rebuilding tomorrow? What is the final end state this operation is designed to achieve? The White House focused entirely on sheer destruction, without addressing a single strategic objective for peace. Within 30 minutes of Trump's update, Iranian state media released an official statement. They declared that what America calls a victory, Iran calls the beginning of a long war that America cannot possibly win. They promised the cost to America for this aggression will be paid across decades, not days. When Iranian leadership speaks of decades, they are activating a deeply entrenched network that has been preparing for this exact day since the 1980s. Hezbollah in Lebanon is a heavily armed paramilitary force with an estimated 150,000 precision-guided rockets currently locked onto specific buildings in Tel Aviv. Down in Yemen, Houthi forces possess the asymmetrical capability to completely choke off the Red Sea. In Iraq and Syria, heavily armed militias operate within a few short miles of isolated American bases housing thousands of troops. This is the ultimate tripwire for a shadow campaign specifically designed to impose cumulative, bleeding costs that eventually exceed the American public's will to sustain a permanent Middle East engagement. The global markets understood this reality instantly. Brent crude spiked 18% in after-hours trading. The Strait of Hormuz carries 21% of all global petroleum. Even with Iranian naval forces heavily degraded, the lingering threat of underwater mines and hidden shore-based missiles keeps that critical strait under paralyzing risk perception. Energy analysts project that if these operations continue for even another week, global oil prices could easily exceed $200 per barrel. A surge to $200 a barrel does not just mean painful trips to the gas station, it means the absolute paralysis of the global supply chain. Aviation fuel costs will ground commercial fleets. Diesel prices will force trucking companies into immediate bankruptcy, causing grocery store shelves to empty and food prices to violently spike. The rampant inflation that the Federal Reserve spent years trying to kill will return with a devastating vengeance. A flawless military victory in the air absolutely does not prevent a catastrophic economic disaster on the ground. On the ground, regional allies are responding with deep private panic. Israel welcomed the strikes but is now bracing for a massive Hezbollah retaliation that could bring devastating rocket attacks raining down on its cities. Saudi Arabia quietly scrambled to enhance security for its highly vulnerable oil infrastructure. The United Arab Emirates nervously calculated whether retaliation will target the American military bases sitting directly on Emirati soil. Internationally, the reaction was deeply anxious. European nations issued statements calling for restraint, conspicuously avoiding any endorsement of the unilateral operation. China condemned the operation immediately. Beijing knows that an isolated, heavily sanctioned Iran is deeply dependent on Chinese markets. By continuing to purchase millions of barrels of Iranian oil on the black market, China effectively funds the very resistance that American pilots are currently risking their lives to destroy. Russia called the operation illegal and warned of globally destabilizing consequences. This is not empty diplomatic rhetoric. Moscow has deep, vested interests in seeing the United States bogged down in a permanent Middle Eastern quagmire that drains American military stockpiles and distracts from Eastern Europe. Russian intelligence units could easily provide sophisticated cyber cover for Iranian hackers preparing to target American electrical grids. So, where does Operation Epic Fury actually lead? Three distinct scenarios are emerging. First, the optimistic scenario. Continued strikes degrade Iranian capabilities so severely that Tehran is forced to accept a negotiated settlement and regional tensions eventually decrease. Second, the stalemate scenario. Operations continue, but Iranian retaliation proves far more effective than anticipated. Proxy attacks cause casualties, cyber operations disrupt critical infrastructure, and oil markets remain in a permanent state of crisis. The operation achieves tactical bombing success, but produces a strategic stalemate. Third, the nightmare scenario. Iranian retaliation crosses red lines that demand escalation far beyond airstrikes. American forces face sustained, deadly attacks. The air campaign inevitably expands to include ground operations, forced regime change efforts, and a massive regional war that draws in multiple global actors and lasts for years. 2 hours ago, the world changed. The operation is real. The strikes are ongoing, The capabilities being destroyed are undeniably significant, but the update focused entirely on tactical explosions while leaving the fundamental, terrifying strategic questions completely unanswered. What exactly happens when the strikes finally end and the Iranian will to resist has not been broken? Epic Fury as a name suggests an overwhelming, unstoppable offensive action. But as a strategy, it perfectly reveals the massive, dangerous gap between America's ability to destroy targets from the sky and its capacity to achieve any lasting strategic peace on the ground. The president spoke of fury. Iran has promised generational resistance. The operation is only 3 days old. The devastating economic and human consequences will unfold across timelines that neither side can fully control.